updated on the.
I did.
Oh, yeah.
Got a haircut.
Oh, no, you're right.
Springtime.
You're right.
Yeah,
Okay,
that looks
okay.
You like it?
Okay.
The way the front
Get a
is.
haircut.
Is that the only change?
And right here's a little different. Yeah. Very good.
So I got her haircut recently. She also got braces.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Oh, how's that going?
Good. So far, so good. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Somewhat.
Did you ever have to have braces?
No. Yeah, thank God.
I'm good. Enjoying springtime. I'll change the one. That's my theory.
Supposed to change?
Yeah, afraid so. What's that? What's gonna change?
That's typical springtime, I guess.
Yeah. I don't mind snow.
I like that better. A lot better.
White rain.
Precipitation? Heavy precipitation?
Question for you.
I knew what you meant.
Is this church all the time, huh? Or is this?
Let's see here, yeah. EHA is established by state statute, so you can't have. You have to do that the same way you'd appoint any other member, because once a council member's appointed, they're on.
Careful.
Yeah, so if you had, fill one of the,
I just like to pull this up in case.
And I do. That works like that. Hard copy.
Sure, this is alive. Yeah, you need to speak real close.
Do you?
Real loud and real close. Sorry.
Great. Here I know everybody's.
That's for Inwood Housing and for URA. Yeah. Both of them are like.
Nothing to get nervous about.
Well, you know what to say. I'm just gonna chew and say.
So, and what I really did is just take, but really just,
Perfect.
that work? Here it's easier than trying to
Really like this overall.
just. You know, I've got some irises.
because of
Yeah, but I'm getting ready to take those out.
Yes. You,
It was painful, but,
any better this year than last year?
oh, worse. So much worse.
Hostas?
Really?
you know, the ethics that
You know, right now they are,
conflict of interest.
they'll end up,
Our, last year the accountant gave us more optimistic outlook than he probably should have. Ours was slightly less, but not much. But
Yeah.
still, we'll be sending them a check and not the other way around.
Printed this one, the first version I
It's
sent.
it's a hard check to write.
No, I printed it.
I forget about it too, which is the bad part, and then it comes out of the blue.
one's at work.
Less, like a more,
Still kind of like,
Used to have those in my office, and they seem to have disappeared because they're very hot items.
yeah, kind of asked.
They're expensive, but you shouldn't be printing off that much anyway.
regular stapler for 99 cents,
I
but
know.
we can do 25 pages and we're like jumps to $20.
I think it's more than that. But, yeah.
All the color that Murphy put in upstairs, I mean, you can kind of.
Yeah.
I think we're here. Good evening, council. Is this started? Are you ready, Jade? Okay, great. I don't know if mine is working or not. Is it? You can hear it? Okay, I need to go even closer. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Englewood study session here on April 15th. Hope you all got your taxes in. If not, get there by midnight. Our first agenda item tonight is the board and commission member discussion. And this is to give out information to all of us and be clear as we go into the interviews, and then some direction as well. And here to present is, interim city manager Hargrove.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and members of council. I'm here tonight with Debbie Severa. I hope you all know her, the executive assistant for Parks, Recreation, and Library, who's helping out with the board and commission packet information while Krista is out on leave. And I will let her take it away. She's very prepared and can give you an overview and answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. Staff tonight is requesting council direction by consensus to prepare a resolution for both the reappointments and the alternate to regular member appointments. In the packet you were provided, you'll see that we have 5 citizen members whose terms are expiring that are eligible for reappointment. In the packet includes their application, the letters of recommendation, and the members' attendance reports. As a note, the packet you received on Thursday did not have the letter recommendation for Jason White. That was received after the packet went out. The packet tonight includes that letter of recommendation, and Lorette and Rita, the letter is, you have a copy of that letter now.
Yes, thank you.
There are also 2 members that are currently alternate members that the chair to those respective boards are recommending that they be moved to regular member positions. A letter of recommendation from the board's chair and the members' attendance reports have been provided. We're currently in the process of accepting new applicants for the July 1st appointments. The deadline for submitting applications will be May 17th. Depending on the number of applications that we receive, council will interview early June. So let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. Council members, any comments or questions? Councilmember Martinez.
I have a question. Just want to make sure I understand. So on the kind of chart we have here where it says application, there's several members that say no. That means they're not reapplying, correct? Okay,
Correct.
got
They're
it.
eligible to reapply. They chose
Not to.
not
Okay,
to.
got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Sierra.
Just looking ahead, do we happen to know what dates we'll be holding the interviews?
No, but I panicked today about it because I realized we hadn't done that, so thank you for asking, and we have such a busy end of May and June, so I don't know if you want to try and do that now, or we just send out some of our dates that we know. That'd be better. Were you thinking of some?
Well, Krista has shown me how to do a doodle poll, so if that works best for you guys, I can do that.
That would be great. I think then we
Okay.
can all sort of stew over it and figure out what works.
Okay, I'll get that out to you guys in the next week.
Thank you. Any further questions or concerns? As we don't make our decisions in here on any of this, it'll be done on the night of, so now we know what they all are. Councilmember Martinez.
When will we have the full list of the vacancies that we're going to be filling?
So there is a list in the packet.
Okay.
That is up to date, assuming that you approve your, or
Reappoint these
the
members. Got it.
reappointments. It does not include if you move the alternate members to the regular members, that would then remove that regular member for planning and zoning and code enforcement.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is great. We have a lot of good information earlier on. Appreciate it. And
So
go ahead.
my understanding is that our next step is to bring the resolutions to council for vote. So
They come all together, right? Yeah,
well, the last time we did this, each of the resolutions was separate.
right, but they'll be all on the same evening, right?
All on the same evening, yes, yes, ma'am.
We can always make changes that evening. Yep. Okay. No further comments? Then our next item is the Board and Commission Handbook. And our City Attorney Alison McKenney Brown is here to help us discuss this handbook and answer any questions. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's reverberating the same way.
Yeah, it doesn't sound.
I don't know that mine really is on. Yes, it is. You can use mine. Yeah, it's probably smarter.
Thank you. So I will talk this close to it. The handbook for boards, commissions, and committees was originally presented by the deputy city manager over a year ago in its initial draft. There were some suggested changes, I want to say a year ago, January, that came back to me, or actually came back to the deputy city manager at that time. But it all rolled back to me to type this back up and get it back out to you, which I have. I don't have any further presentation to make on this because you've already seen a presentation, as I recall. I did get, after I sent out the draft to you about 3 weeks ago, so everybody would have it to be able to read well in advance, because it's a lot of reading. I did get comments back from a couple of people, just questions like you all will do on occasion. And it was pointed out to me that the only reason historically that a person who's been applying for a position has been asked to wait was if they were in current litigation or with the city. And I think that situation, I recall that situation right about the time I started. So the version that went out with the iCompass packet included that update based on how City Council has handled that situation in the past. But other than that, again, it's a document that we would like City Council to read through. And if there's anything that you disapprove of or you would like to see in it, we want to make those updates and changes. The goal of this document is to advise the members of the various committees on what to expect. There's some information in there on open meetings, open records, what it means to do action minutes, what a council liaison's role is. There, I think it was the summer before last when I had Jenna Lewis as my legal intern. She put together that chart on what each of the committees are and whether or not they have a liaison. If they do, how many liaisons, whether or not they have youth members. Again, this is something that you would adopt by regular motion, and just like your council policy manual. And as issues come up, for example, I think there are places where you'd like to consider doing more youth members. That's a simple motion. That would be a motion to update this. The real changes happen through the code, which is an ordinance through the code. So if you at any point decide to do a code update, that changes anything with any board or commission, you would also include in that, and to update the handbook in accordance. So this doesn't, you are not married to this for the rest of your life. The one thing about brand new documents like this is you need to anticipate that they're going to need to be revisited annually for a couple of years. There will be pieces that do fit or don't fit, or as we get into it, you'll say, wait a second, that is just a whole lot more vague and we need it clarified. But until you've started to use it, we're not going to know those things. So we started out with about 50% of this is another city's stab at this, and about 50% of it is overlaid with the needs of Inglewood. So we weren't trying to go outside any kind of standard handbook for boards and commissions. So that's a general introduction to it, and I am willing to step back and take notes as you guys talk amongst yourselves about what parts of it you like and what parts of it you don't like.
Thank you. Questions, council? Comments? Councilmember Martinez.
I have a couple questions, but I need to find where the spot is. So I think on page 25, where it has that chart about the council liaisons, so that is outlining, I think it's which ones are, let me get there. Boards and commissions with no legislated council liaison, but we do serve in that capacity in some of those roles. So is the question kind of, should we make a change in the bylaws or the code or wherever, or we just kind of still liaise without formalizing it?
What we've put into the handbook is a recognition of when a council liaison is created by ordinance or charter, like the Water and Sewer Board. But when it's not created by charter, we just assume it's a standard liaison, which is a member of this council volunteers to go sit with whatever board or commission, take notes. Occasionally, they may be asked to report on, hey, is anything happening with city council that impacts this board or commission, and they would do that. So council liaisons, unless the charter or the code makes them a member, basically have the same role as any other citizen who attends.
Got it. So we wouldn't need to formalize anything necessarily if it's not already there.
Right.
Okay.
If at any point you want to give a council liaison more authority, honestly, you need to make them a member of the board.
Sure. Okay, great. And then I had another question, but let me find where it is in the packet.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Thank you. One thing that I noticed here after Councilmember Martinez asked that question, it says, and this is on a couple of different places, Parks and Rec Commission, it says no on liaison.
That's what your current documents say. So what the chart is what your current documents say. Since I've gotten here, two members, I think, two have been sent, but
Only one.
is it just one?
There's
To
one
Parks and
there.
Rec? But anyway, we pulled together all of the enabling legislation we could find and any resolutions that might have been passed, and just tried to go back and create what official actions have been taken. One of the things is a council liaison is not an official title. It's, I volunteer, I'll go sit with that committee. So I honestly don't see how it matters if a council liaison is formalized or not. If this body wants a city council member to have a formal role, then they make that part of the ordinance or part of charter.
So the formal role, meaning that they would be voting members or just...
Potentially, Water Sewer Board, they are voting members. So, yeah, they can be made voting members by formal action of the council. If the council wanted them to have a formal role that was not a voting member, the council would need to develop what that idea might be and then incorporate it. But at this point, you have a formal relationship for just a handful of boards and commissions, and that informal relationship that has just been adopted off the cuff.
Okay, so, and I guess the reason I'm asking this question is because like the Public Library Board has a liaison, the Transportation Advisory Committee has a liaison. And I mean, if we have expectations, we appointed people to those boards. If we have expectations that we're going to be there to be the liaison, I think that perhaps we do need to formalize that. Not necessarily make them a voting member, but if there's no accountability, why show up?
And that's an excellent way to have worded it, because you haven't appointed liaisons. An appointment is a formal process that happens in this by action of the city council. So what you do is you sit here in a study session and each of you just volunteer to show up. There may be a set of expectations associated with that volunteer position. That has not been formalized. But none of you were appointed to be liaisons.
Okay.
And
Because
as a
that's
matter
a
of fact,
formal
we've
action.
swapped them many times. Like I'm not sure who's on some things right now.
Right. Okay.
This has been incredibly enlightening to me to see that this is, and that we've been following some sort of a, I guess, a historical process that hasn't necessarily been put down in writing before.
Right, and I do appreciate your work on this and bringing that out. Thank you.
Councilmember Barentine.
It's been a process that's worked, I don't know for how many decades now, but with a different interpretation of this. But I'm hoping that that's not really true, that we don't really know who the liaisons are for.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's on Water and Sewer Board anymore.
I am. Would you like me to tell you?
But so, Mayor
Councilmember
Pro
Wing,
Tem Russell was there last week.
you
and
are
also-
done by charter,
Right,
so you know for sure you're on it.
right,
And then I'm on it, and Councilmember Wink is on it.
right. But Mayor
So
Pro Tem
hopefully
Russell
that
came
clears
last
that up.
week and spoke and sat at the table as if she was part. So then I got confused as whether she was representing Member Wink or what. So I think it was
Oh,
unclear.
you should have asked. I'm sure she can answer.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the committee didn't know then at that point. So we probably should be really clear with our committee, on that committee in particular, who's going to be there and who isn't.
I'd
Okay,
like to
can
hear
I-
your answer. I think I'm still have the floor.
Go ahead.
All right, I can
Yes, please.
respond. I actually was there last week for Councilmember Barentine, and so, and I don't always show up because I am not the liaison to that, so.
That's actually what the chair thought you were, and then she came, and then you both talked, and then Cheryl wasn't there, so then we were like, at the end, they said, so who's really on this? And I said,
Actually, I think she
I
made
need
it.
to check.
Actually, I think she made it pretty clear. As soon as I came, she said, "Councilmember Barentine's here." She got up and gave me her seat at the table. So I think it might have been clear to.
Way good.
I'm
We
glad
got
we
that
cleared
clear.
it up for you, though. Is there any other board or commission that we have some confusion on who the member is?
No, I'm not sure everyone here knows who they all are, though, so we probably should. And we've never regulated them in there because we have some people have swapped with CML and other things. So I think we probably should go over it and make sure everybody knows. So let's just talk about whether or not this, though, is currently accurate. I know you want to say that I don't know what's going on, and in some cases I don't.
what I said at all.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to revisit that because I know I did ask Cheryl to take over one of mine, and I don't know if everyone else knows, so I think it would be good if we all just revisit that. And I have two other questions. One is on residency, which is on page 7 of the handbook. And as I read it, it sounds like folks who are on our boards and commission need to be Inglewood residents unless it says otherwise in the bylaws or something like that.
Not the bylaws. The bylaws are created by the members,
Okay, right.
and
So
the members have no authority. The members can only create rules within the rules you've already given them.
okay. So I guess if it says in the ordinance, then that they have to be residents, But if it doesn't say that, then non-residents could serve. Is that correct?
You, as a body, need to decide that.
Yeah.
I have never worked in a city where people who are not residents of the city served on the boards and commissions. This is the first city that's interpreted it backwards from everywhere else I've worked. So the way the handbook is written is it lets people know that unless otherwise noted within the ordinance that you have to be a resident to serve on an Inglewood committee. And the reason for that is especially this city where you have so many people applying, and the idea that a resident is competing against a non-resident for a seat on the Inglewood's boards and commissions seems unfair. So I've got it set, I've written it in such a way that if you're not a resident, you cannot apply unless it's specifically authorized.
Got it.
As a body, if you want to decide that it's fine with you if non-residents participate on these volunteer boards in competition with the residents, that's your call.
I thank you, and thank you for all your work on this. It's really helpful to see everything all together and very clear, so thank you so much for doing all that. I am glad this is in here. I would like to maybe move in that direction. It hasn't come up in my experience except for recently where one of our members we appointed moved then out of Inglewood since they were appointed. So it came up as a question for me, and so I'm glad that we're going to talk about it. So I don't know if we should talk about that now, but I have another question as well, which is on quorum, which is on page 19.
You're on 19 for the electronic, right?
I'm on the actual, the 19 of the actual document. So
Okay.
I am viewing it online, but it's page
So
19.
hard
of
copy
the-
for the 19 as well.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah. Where it's, so quorum, one of my boards and commissions recently asked about the process for changing quorum. They've had some members drop out recently, and so I said I would ask what the process of that is. Do we either, because I think it's for KEB, and so right now I think it's 5 members. So all 5 members would need to show up each time because we have a couple of vacancies. So I don't know what the process is in changing quorum. It looks like it just says, unless otherwise set by enabling legislation or bylaws. So we could either change the number of members on that board or change the quorum required. Is that correct?
Correct. And in a couple of the boards and commissions, it specifically sets the number of people for quorum. But if it's not otherwise set, it is whatever would equal 51%.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to go back to the first topic that Councilmember Martinez talked about, which was residency. And I think that haven't we, I mean, in our conversations in the last 3 or 4 years, and maybe even before that, that all the boards' residency is required. The only one that's an exception to that is the ACE committee. They have to be employed by a business in the city. Is that understanding correct?
If you're asking me,
Yes.
that was, there was one more. KEB also had people that were not in the city of Inglewood. And it's historically had on and off people who were on it and then moved and were so involved. And it was the one that I was told early on when I came on that that was allowed. And looking at the bylaws, it didn't say it couldn't be. So I think what we're finding is we have a little bit more light on some of these by the work she's done. So we have to decide. I agree, though. I think ACE makes sense. KEB doesn't. We probably should have it just be citizens.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barentine.
ACE is specific in it. ACE is very
Alrighty.
specific in who the members are, so I don't think there's any question with that. Nor is the election board, because it says an elector of the city. The rest of them, through the decades, we've seemed to manage to understand who the members were, persons. So I understand what the city attorney is saying, that there's some difference in there. I don't ever remember any board it being okay that there was, maybe that was the in-between time from when I was on councils, but I don't remember any citizen being on a board other than ACE, where it was allowed for them to be outside of the city. And it's come up several times in the 20 years that I've been doing this. It's come up where you have this as person's active or whatever, and the decision's always been that they have to be representing the city. And in order to do that, they have to live with the decisions that they make, and that means that they have to be in the community, not making decisions for our community outside of that. So if you have some other examples from KB, I mean, with it being more of a volunteer board, but I really don't want, we have so many people, as the city attorney has pointed out, that apply, that I really would not want to start down the slippery slope of allowing people on one, and then there's an exception on another, and we either have the rule that we have boards and commissions with people who are on there representing the community they live in, or not. And so I really don't want to start making little exceptions here and there, and that's why it gets confusing later on down the road. But I don't remember it ever being allowed. So whether there was an exception made because somebody particularly likes somebody, and that's also a slippery slope to go down, because we always end up finding somebody who's just as capable, just as competent in our community, and nobody's stopped from volunteering. They just don't have a voting role on there. So,
Councilmember Sierra.
Just a question or a comment. Would it make sense to include the current bylaws of each committee somewhere within this document, or at least make it easily accessible for them? Just since this is a document that everybody should read, I'm guessing that maybe we could provide a current link to the bylaws.
City Attorney.
I think that it's very easy for us to provide a current link to the bylaws. This document was supposed to only be 10 pages, so it'd be really user-friendly, and you can see it blew up to put all the stuff in it that was requested. So I'd recommend not putting anything else in it and just do links. But also, we could put on the very first page, additional information is available at X website, so people would know to go there directly.
Great. I will give another example. I was on KEB from 2001 to 2009, and we had someone, and I was just a citizen who was serving, and we did have someone that was allowed to stay on who moved out of the city, and I don't know how that decision was made. I was not part of that. So I think it's smart for us to keep it all be Englewood citizens for all of them, in that we, since it isn't clear, we not just let this be to, well, it's worked for 20 years when actually we've violated it in 20 years. So let's make it really clear. And so I wonder if we can write that into everything, if that's something we have to just go back to the bylaws and have them adopt, or what. But I think we should make it clear. And then ACE would be the one, I think, unless there's some disagreement amongst us, that really does allow for it, because it makes sense that they're not going to live.
ACE states in the ordinance
It
it's
already
without
does, right.
regard to
So
residency.
just don't want to be having anybody listening and thinking we're going to change that one. That will stay the same. Yep. I don't know what's so funny, but yeah, it sounds good for everybody. Okay. I think this looks great. I'm ready to bring it forward and say, hey, it's a good start. And if we start to run into problems with any of it, we start making shifts and changes in it. Are you all okay with us having her bring it forward in a formalized way? Councilmember Martinez?
I would like to bring it forward, and I would also like to get the board and commission's feedback on it, just maybe after it's after it's, good to go and we approve it, then maybe just make sure the board and commissions can review it, and if they have questions, let us know. And of course, like you said, it's kind of going to be an ongoing evolution, always improving. So I don't know what that process is like. As a liaison, I'm happy to send it to the chairs or the groups that I'm a part of, and just say, once it's approved, hey, take a look at this. We're going to be following this. Any questions? Let me know.
Councilmember Wink?
Thank you. This isn't something I'm suggesting be part of this document, but just in the vein of this conversation, when we've made decisions on new appointees to the boards and commissions, are we sending? Are we providing the chairs of the groups with the application packet for each new individual at some point? Or are they just showing up as the new person?
Manager Hargrove?
In my experience and my understanding is it's a little bit of both. What I was about to say is that once this document is finalized and approved by council, the city manager and the city clerk's office working together to be much more systematic about training and the distribution of the documents and all that information, which hasn't been consistently or effectively done, I think.
Thank you. I think,
Makes sense.
yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Good.
Manager Hargrove, did you have something else you had? That was it? Great. Oh, you're anticipating a great question. Other folks? Councilmember Martinez.
I have a lot of questions, sorry.
That's all right. Let's get this right.
Somebody mentioned, I think it might have been our attorney, that we might want to add more youth members to other groups. What would now be a good time to talk about which one of those, which boards and commissions we think makes sense to add, or should we do that at a later time? I'm just thinking now because we are going to be interviewing pretty soon, and I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to include some students who may be entering their summer term and have more time to serve if they wanted to.
City Attorney?
So the first step in that conversation is, are these going to be voting members or are they going to be non-voting members? If they're going to be voting members, then you as a body would decide which boards or committees, commissions that you wanted these junior members to be on. And we would bring back ordinances because we would have to amend the enabling legislation. If these would be non-voting members, which would basically be their role would be to provide a younger person's input. And there's several committees. Parks and Rec stands out to me as one that could really use some young people's input. You might, by resolution, just add youth members to certain organizations, and while they would not have a formal vote, their input would be requested by the chair on actions or something. So that can be done much less formally. But that's the first conversation, is what is the scope of authority that you want to give your junior members?
Any answer that?
Yeah, I guess, and with that, is the only board or commission that does have voting youth member, is it only Parks and Rec? I don't think their members vote, nor Cultural Arts Commission.
Everything that we had that documented if it had any form of membership is in that chart at the
So
back.
then it is only Parks and Rec, it looks like. Okay.
That's the only one where we have any kind of document showing it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. So within this conversation, my mind goes to the question, what's the objective of having youth members join these groups? It seems to me from conversations with all of you over the last several years, when I was on a board and commission and since being on council, that we want to allow these youth the experience and exposure to the processes of making policy and suggesting policy to council and just building your community. If that or something to that effect is the goal of encouraging youth members, then I think it might be easiest to have them be non-voting members, but members whose input is valued and encouraged by the chairs, and open it up to all boards. Because the boards vary in topic and content, and there may be youth with all kinds of, there might be a youth who wants to know about elections. I wouldn't want to limit them the exposure to the different topics that we cover in these groups.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
I really like that idea. And I know also at some points in the past we've talked about having a full youth board. It didn't really go anywhere, but I think we have talked about that at some point. But if in lieu of that, I think opening them all up to a youth member, if a youth member wanted to serve, I think would not be a bad idea. Through this conversation, I thought of another question that I have. At least 2 boards and commissions that I know have school liaisons, and that's not formalized. I don't know if we need to formalize that anywhere. I know the Cultural Arts Commission has one, and I believe the Library Board has one as well, but I don't think it's formalized anywhere. I think on Cultural Arts it did say it somewhere, but it's not really formalized, so I don't know if that needs to be included in this somewhere either.
Right. Councilmember Barentine.
I like Councilmember Martinez's idea about revisiting having an actual youth council, and that might be a little bit different. I don't think it's a wise idea for us to open up a youth member for every board. There are certain things where there are some mentorship where it can be accomplished in that board setting, where I think that anticipation would be counterproductive to some of the work, especially for the quasi-judicial boards. I don't think that's appropriate. We can open it up a little bit more unless we want to pursue the youth council and maybe try and focus on that, but I think we should do one or the other. I'm not sure we would have enough for both, but I think we have to be very careful which boards we're doing. I don't think planning and zoning is an opportunity for, I don't think the urban renewal, I think some of them are just, certainly if we still had the liquor board, we couldn't do that, I don't think, but, so I think we want to be thoughtful about it, but I think maybe something where we have more of a concentrated effort on actually a youth council might be the ability for them to have some conversation about a wider range of topics, but not necessarily put a board in a position where they believe that they're supposed to be doing some mentoring or explaining that might take away from their purpose. KB is a good one. Obviously, the library and the Parks and Rec where they already are. There's just certain boards that lend themselves to them being able to have some viable input. So it's worth having the discussion, I think. So thanks for bringing that up.
Councilmember Cuesta or Sierra, or either of you have any opinions on any of these?
In reviewing it, I think it is much more straightforward than anything I've read up to this point. I appreciate that you tried to go for 10 pages and it went beyond that. It's comprehensive, I feel like, at this point. It really covers, I think, just about everything. I don't mind the idea of a youth board either. It could be the more involvement we can have from the younger folks that would make sense to me as well. I'd be happy to have that conversation, but I'm ready to move it forward also. Thank you.
Councilmember Sierra?
Same here. Thank you very much for all the work that you put into this, Madam Attorney. I'm ready to see this forward.
One last comment on the youth board, and that is age. If you'll notice in the handbook that for the most part, this city is not doing criminal background checks on everybody who applies. That just gets to be overwhelming. But if you have youth members on a boards with adults, I'm going to encourage you to set a bottom age of 14, and also if it's a youth board that I think we would need to look at, if we're adding youth members, that we do a training on interacting with youth members. And the school systems do that, the churches do that, everybody who's crossing those lines, just to make sure that everybody remembers how to behave appropriately with people so that we don't create a situation unintentionally. And the likelihood that we would is small, but I'm your attorney, it's my job to worry about every little thing, so I do. So as you begin to look at the idea of youth members, think about the age and then think about what kind of training. I absolutely agree with everything Councilmember Barentine just said about the idea of doing a youth board because of the opportunity for mentorship, but it also creates a level of separation that I think is further protective of young people.
Councilmember Martinez.
I was just going to say thank you for thinking of every little thing. That's a really important thing that I had forgotten about. It did come up one time, and so I think that is really important. I think maybe I would suggest that we kind of hold off on making any decisions on that, and then maybe when we meet with the school subcommittee, maybe that's a topic to bring up with them and see how they think would be best served with the students. Also because students have a lot going on, and a lot of times they end up not fulfilling their term commitment or whatever just because, they have a lot going on. So if we can maybe come up with some other ways to keep them more engaged and more involved, I think that would serve them better, and they would probably get more out of it. So maybe we'll hold on that and think more about that.
Thank you. A few other things that I've had thought on this is the youth council thing has come up, I think, every couple of years as an option, and it always ends up that we have come to the conclusion that that means someone from staff is going to have to create something because we don't have full-time jobs here to be able to do that. So how can we make this a meaningful experience for them that somebody's willing to oversee and create the agenda that makes sense and makes it meaningful? Doesn't mean we can't do it, but somebody's got to be in charge of it. It seems more of an educational point of something. And when I've talked to other cities about it at CML, they have a staff person who devotes time on that. And I haven't seen very many small cities be able to do that, but if we want to do it, we certainly can, figure that out. The second thing is that we have had youth positions that are not filled, and we have a hard time getting youth people to come regularly to some of them. And no fault of theirs in that, I know what their lives are like. So I would prefer to go back. I'd agree, let's not go further on this tonight. Perhaps we go back to the commissions, all of them, and ask them, the ones that we think are most appropriate, do you want a youth person? And then I just don't want it to be that the quorum doesn't show up, so keeping it as a volunteer, non-voting member makes a lot of sense to continue that, because they do have busy lives, and at the end of the year right now is their worst time for being able to show up. On the other hand, the third idea would be to talk with Tri-County. They have been doing this special committee that did the parks and smoke-free park kind of thing. It could be that we could have a joint relationship with them for a youth board that they actually have staffing for, that has some sort of a meaningful relationship with us around issues where we ask them to take on some issues. So that could be another way we go at it, and I don't know what kind of fruit that would bear. But maybe we just think for the next few weeks about it and come back to it. But it would be nice when you're in any of your accounts or your boards and commissions, maybe ask them in the next months whether or not they would be interested, if they don't have a youth member, whether they think that would be something that they would benefit from. Councilmember Barentine.
I really like that idea that you just brought up. I think that would keep them engaged in some other areas in the community where they wouldn't just be limited to what we're doing. I think that forum that they did, they were very empowered with a very purposeful adult mentoring focused on them and bringing up issues that are of some interest to them, instead of being stuck maybe where there might be some minimal amount of opportunity for them to be involved or have that interaction. I like the way that they handled themselves, and I like what they put together. So if they'd be willing to do that, maybe we could kind of partner that up. I think that's an amazing idea you came up with from seeing that. So if we could pursue that and see whether that's even viable and bring that as part of this discussion, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, I'm glad to explore that. They're a tremendous group, and they've got staffing, teacher support at the school as well, so that helps. Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
And along the lines of the other question that you asked, I think the meeting before this last one, the ACE committee brought up that idea because one of the members had been talking with a teacher who was wondering if there's a possibility for youth member there. And I mean, if you have a teacher involved also, then you might get connection.
I think it's a good idea. All right, good. We have some ideas. Let's explore those in our own commissions. Maybe we need to figure that ACE thing out further. I know they were looking for entrepreneurship development in that group. All right. Councilmember Martinez.
Sorry, one other question.
All right.
On the midterm vacancies, it says we can fill at the time of the regular scheduled interviews and appointments or during the midterm. I guess I just wonder how we would go about deciding when we would fill it in the midterm. Would it be probably just if a quorum is at stake? Okay.
Super. I think we're done then. We're ready to adjourn this and move next door for the regular meeting. Thank you, everybody. Got a bit of a break. Pardon?